shaft.
Welcome back. In today's episode we're going to turn our attention back to the front subframe. Now believe it or not, the last 2 years a lot of that subframe has only been tack welded together, so this episode is going to involve an awful lot of welding. Before commencing on any welding work on the subframe, I decided to refit it to the jig to help prevent any possible distortion. Before refitting the subframe to the jig though, I helicoiled out the front mounting holes to an M8 thread. The reason for doing this will be revealed shortly. With the subframe back in the jig, we can now finalise the last little bit of welding and a few other jobs that need to be done before it's ready for paint. So I'm going to start a logical place at the top and work my way down. That means the first job is to drill and tap the holes necessary to bolt in the clutch pipe brackets. The first step in doing this was to refit the clutch pipe so the brackets could be held in their correct positions. Just enough space underneath this bar for my tapping wrench. That was in no way planned. When I originally made the bracket, I drilled the holes in it with a tapping drill so that it would act as a guide. With that job done, I now had to clear the holes so the bolts would pass through. With the holes in the bracket drilled out, I could refit it before cutting out the tack welds that was holding the other bracket onto the subframe. Once again, the clutch pipe had to be fitted in order to line up the brackets. With the second bracket clamped in place, it was then just a case of repeating the same process as done with the first one. With the clutch pipe all fitted, we can now look at welding in this top bar fully, and believe it or not, the rear engine mount, because up until this point it's only ever actually been tack welded in. The first step was to clean the areas that were to be welded. next job is to swap this piece here out and the one on the other side. It has this piece taken off the end here, and I did this to get to a nut on the back which was on the other side of this bolt. However, by helicoiling these bars, I no longer need to put a nut on the back of this, so this can be full length, and that will hopefully improve the strength of the joint. So I'm going to take an end grinder, cut my tacks out, and remake this without that notch. There's always that part when fabricating something when you have no choice but to turn the grinder upside down and inevitably shower yourself with sparks. Sensibly, I was wearing both ear and eye protection, but I still preferred to avoid doing this if I could. That was not quite as planned. With the replacement bars cut, I cut the ends ready to be TIG welded together. With the side bar TIG welded together on the bench, I then MIG welded them to the rest of the subframe. Both sides were tack welded in place first before being checked and then fully welded in. The next job is to weld in these little reinforcement mounts. These go here on the subframe's rear mounting holes. Now, I'm not entirely sure if these are needed, however the FEA software that I used to develop this frame said I did, and who am I to argue? They've already been painted in some weld-through primer. So what I've got to do, bolt them in place and weld them in. In case anyone is wondering, the mini standard 5/16 UNF bolts that I used to secure the rear subframe to its mounts are still long enough with these reinforcement plates fitted. The next job is to weld in these little capping pieces into the ends of the tube here, and same on the other side. The next job I'm going to look at is making a front brake pipe. I'm going to do it now because it's a lot easier to drill holes in my frame and tap it to put P-clip mounts in when I can flip this upside down in the jig rather than trying to do it on the car. I will have to make a brand new pipe or rebend my old one because the pipe's got to be slightly longer. We had to reposition the mounting points for the flex lines because the gearbox got in the way on the passenger side. The first step in making the brake pipe and its mounts was to fit the flex lines to the subframe. With the flex lines fitted, I then fitted the original brake line to the driver's side of the subframe. I did this so I could bend it into position to work out how to clear the tie rod mounts and where I could fit the P-clips. In order to drill the last two holes and so that I could get my tapping wrench in, I had to remove the side parts of the subframe jig. With the subframe drilled and tapped and the rest of the jig put back in, we can now look at actually making the pipe. That's going to start removing these fittings off the end of this one. Just to reiterate, in case anybody missed the episode where I made the clutch pipe, this is not copper, this is cunifer. It's a copper nickel alloy which has a much higher fatigue strength which is required for hydraulic lines. Copper is fine for fuel lines, but don't use it for hydraulic lines such as clutch lines and brake lines. With my slight rant about which material to make brake lines from and the fittings off the old one removed and cleaned, I could start making a new brake pipe by flaring the end. Remember to put the fitting on the pipe first. In case you were wondering, that piece of metal is 5mm thick, the distance the instructions of my pipe flaring tool says needs to protrude to begin with. With the one end of the brake pipe flared, I connected to the flex line and bent it around the subframe, securing it in place with some plastic P-clips, utilising the holes that I created earlier. With the brake pipe in place, I could then cut it to length, ready to have the other end flared. Pipe cutters are such a useful little tool. When you can find where you misplaced it. The final step was to connect the brake line to the T-piece that bolts onto the driver's side flex line. Any of you who've been following this build series for a while may recognise this part. This is the start of the inlet manifold support bracket, which we never finished building. The reason I didn't do it is purely because of poor access to the back of the engine while this lot was all in the car. Obviously now it's much easier to do. This lives somewhere around about here on the inside of the inlet manifold, and needs to pick up on these two bolt holes that are cast into the back of the engine block. I also want to incorporate some form of upper steady bar into the bracket, purely because of the proximity of the water pump to the strut tower. First job, get the inlet manifold back on. I'm going to end the episode here. Come back next time to see the completion of the inlet manifold support bracket and the subframe. If you've enjoyed this episode, then please hit that like button and share. If you want to stay up to date with the build, then please subscribe to my channel, and you can check out my build thread on the mini forum where I sometimes post some sneak peeks of up and coming episodes and behind the scenes stuff. The link can be found in the description below. Once again, thanks for watching.